Gurave Namaha. Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Tadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavangsha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathanvitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadhutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhanvitangscha He Krishna Karuna Sindho Dinabandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanchakalpa Tarubhyascha Kripa Sindhu Vyevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So we always also chant a small prayer in honor of the 6 Goswamis of Vrindavan, headed by Rupa Goswami, whose book we are reading in the Nectar of Instruction. Nana Shastra Vicharanaika Nipuno Sadharma Sanstapako Lokanam Hitakarino Tribhuvane Manyao Sharanyakaro Radha Krishna Padara Vinda Bhajana Nandena Mattaliko Vande Rupa Sanatano Raghujugo Shri Jiva Gopalako. I offer my respectful obeisances unto the 6 Goswamis, namely Shri Rupa Goswami, Shri Sanatan Goswami, Shri Raghunath Bhatta Goswami, Shri Raghunath Das Goswami, Shri Jiva Goswami, and Shri Gopala Bhatta Goswami, who are very expert in scrutinizingly studying all the revealed scriptures with the aim of establishing eternal religious principles for the benefit of all human beings. Thus they are honored all over the 3 worlds, and they're worth taking shelter of, because they're absorbed in the mood of the gopis and are engaged in the transcendental loving service of Radha and Krishna. So in this text, the Rupa Goswami is speaking about what is real taste, what is our actual true taste that we should be relishing. And that taste is the taste of the holy name. So as you do, I will start with reading the verse. And since these verses are so important, we will also be reading the purports in class. And we're only doing 2 today, so we will have plenty of time. So this is text 7. We've now covered in the last 6 verses. We have covered the requirements needed for spiritual development, for spiritual life. What are things that are conducive for spiritual life? What are things that go against spiritual life? We've also talked about relationships, how to deal with other devotees, how to exchange our heart, you so to say, relationships with them, how to recognize different levels of devotees, how to relate with these different levels of devotees, how not to offend devotees. And now, after covering all that, now Rupa Goswami is telling us the essence of all advice. Now he's telling us that what are we doing all this for? Why are we controlling our senses? Why are we associating with devotees? Why are we avoiding materialistic things? Why are we performing 6 things that are conducive for our spiritual life? And this here is now the reason why we are doing these things. Syat Krishna Nama Charitadadis Sitapya Vidya Pito Patapta Rasanasya Narochikanu Kintvadarat Anudinam Khalu Saiva Jushta Swadvikramad Bhavati Tad Gadamula Hantri. Translation: the holy name, character, pastimes, and activities of Krishna are all transcendently sweet, like sugar candy. Although the tongue of one afflicted by the jaundice of avidya, ignorance, cannot taste anything sweet, it is wonderful that simply by carefully chanting these sweet names every day, a natural relish awakens within his tongue, and his disease is gradually destroyed at the root. Purport: the holy name of Lord Krishna, his quality, pastimes, and so forth, are all of the nature of absolute truth, beauty, and bliss. Naturally, they are very sweet, like sugar candy, which appeals to everyone. Nescience, however, is compared to the disease called jaundice, which is caused by bilious secretions. Attacked by jaundice, the tongue of a diseased person cannot palatably relish sugar candy. Rather, a person with jaundice considers something sweet to taste very bitter. Avidya, ignorance, similarly perverts the ability to relish the transcendently palatable name, quality, form, and pastimes of Krishna. Despite this disease, if one with great care and attention takes to Krishna consciousness, chanting the holy name and hearing Krishna's transcendental pastimes, his ignorance will be destroyed and his tongue enabled to taste the sweetness of the transcendental nature of Krishna and his paraphernalia. Such a recovery as spiritual health is possible only by the regular cultivation of Krishna consciousness. When a man in the mature world takes more interest in the materialistic way of life than in Krishna consciousness, he is considered to be in a diseased condition. The normal condition is to remain an eternal servant of the Lord. The healthy condition is lost when the living entity forgets Krishna due to being attracted by the external feature of Krishna's Maya energy. This world of Maya is called Durashya, which means false or bad shelter. One who puts his faith in Durashya becomes a candidate for hoping against hope. In the mature world, everyone is trying to become happy. Although their material attempts are baffled in every way, due to their nescience, they cannot understand their mistakes. People try to rectify one mistake by making another mistake. This is the way of the struggle for existence in the material world. If one in this condition is advised to take to Krishna consciousness and be happy, he does not accept such instructions. This Krishna consciousness movement is being spread all over the world. Just to remedy this gross ignorance, people in general are misled by blind leaders. The leaders of human society, the politicians, philosophers, and scientists are blind because they are not Krishna conscious. According to Bhagavad Gita, because they're bereft of all factual knowledge due to their atheistic way of life, they're actually sinful rascals and are the lowest among men. Namam Dishkritano Mudha Prapadyante Naradhama Maya Paritagyana Asram Bhavam Ashrita. Those miscreants who are grossly foolish, lowest among mankind, whose knowledge is stolen by illusion, and who partake of the atheistic nature of demons, do not surrender unto me. Just one point I want to make here, which I think is a very, very important sentence here, is people try to rectify one mistake by making another mistake. So this is the way of mature life, that that we try to rectify one mistake by making another mistake. Prahlad Maharaj says how the solution to a problem is oftentimes more troublesome than the problem itself. And in the material world, this is what everyone does. In order to solve one problem, we try to make another material solution, and that creates an even bigger problem. And in this way, there's just problem after problem. We were actually talking last night in one program, small home program, that one devotee made this very nice comment. She said how, and she's from the West, she grew up in America and she's American, and she said how after she became a devotee, and when after sort of reading and understanding about the nature of the material world, she could understand why in India, when something breaks or something like this, when in India, why they don't fix anything. She said she said that there's no reason to fix anything, because when it's going to break anyway, so they just leave it the way it is. Of course, the point here is not that we should not maintain anything or fix anything. The point here is not that if we're going to stay in mature life, we should not be efficient. But the point is that if we have spiritual life, if we are engaged in spiritual life, then we are not as enthusiastic to fix the material world and fix the material problems. The problem now in India is that, well, yes, that mode of goodness attitude is there, that if there's a material problem, if the road is broken, you don't fix it because it's material, and your focus should be on spiritual life. But the problem in India today is that they're not focusing on spiritual life. It is all, for most people, just material life. But even that material life, is not being done properly. But the point is that if we do have a focus on spiritual life, then actually we have no reason to try to, make this world a very efficient place. And this is the vision of a devotee. When we have this mood, then we will have time for chanting. If we have this mood of not trying to fix every material problem, but letting things be so that we have more time for spiritual life, then we will be able to chant more. Because in order to chant, we need time. I was just reading a quote from Prabhupada. He says, the life of leisure, the leisurely life does not go well with spiritual life. So if we are trying to mature, our mature leisure or this, that, we have to take time out for spiritual life. One nice example of this is that there was one sage who got the benediction that this sage would not have to die for a lifetime of Brahma. So he was such a powerful sage. He was pretty much going to die at will, which means he was going to live for a lifetime of Brahma. That time period is 311 trillion years. 311 trillion years. I think I might have my calculations wrong, but imagine a life that's that long. And he was chanting in his hut. He was meditating in his hut. And at a certain point, a storm came and there was a big hole in his hut. So the hole was there, and so water was leaking, was coming through his hut. So he sat down and he sat with his umbrella because there was a hole now in the hut. And then he continued chanting. So some villagers came and they told the sage that why don't you fix the roof of your hut? Why don't you fix the roof? And the sage replied to them, he said that I'm here only for a short period of time. My time is very limited. I'm not going to stay here very long because I have to die very quickly. So how can I spend time fixing this hut? My time for chanting will go away. So the point being that he had a lifetime of Brahma, and he was saying, I don't have any time. I'm here only temporarily. Why would I want to fix it? Why would I want to fix it if I'm temporarily staying here? And we have a lifetime of maybe 50 years left. I know for myself, I'm speaking. Hopefully, if I'm very fortunate, then we think we have so much time. Let me make all the situations so mature life is very comfortable, very nice, very leisurely. So this is our problem, right? This is our problem. Just like when we go to a hotel room and we stay there for 1 or 2 days, we don't try to fix it up. I'm here so temporarily. But we think that at a home, I'm there permanently, or at some place, wherever we are, I'm there permanently. And that is our illusion. That is the great illusion. So Prabhupada, you're saying we should not try to solve one mistake by making another mistake. We wasted our time so much in mature life, and now let me try to solve it by wasting more time in mature life. That is not our policy. Such people never surrender to Krishna. They oppose the endeavor of those who wish to take Krishna's shelter. When such atheists become leaders of society, the entire atmosphere is surcharged with nescience. In such a condition, people do not become very enthusiastic to receive this Krishna consciousness movement, just as a diseased person suffering from jaundice does not relish the taste of sugar candy. However, one must know that for jaundice, sugar candy is the only specific medicine. Similarly, in the present confused state of humanity, Krishna consciousness, the chanting of the holy name of the Lord, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare, is the only remedy for setting the world aright. Although Krishna consciousness may not be very palatable for a diseased person, Srila Rupa Goswami nonetheless advises that if one wants to be cured of the material disease, he must take to it with great care and attention. One begins his treatment by chanting the Hare Krishna Mahamantra, because by chanting this holy name of the Lord, a person in the material condition will be relieved from all misconceptions. Cheto Darpana Marjanam. Avidya, a misconception about one's spiritual identity, provides the foundation for ahankar, or false ego within the heart. So the metaphor that's being used here, which is, I think, one of the most famous metaphors regarding spiritual life and chanting, is that when we chant right now, we feel it's something very bitter, something very tasteless. And this is a fact. When we start chanting, we start checking our phone because we're not interested in the chanting. When we start chanting, we start remembering all the important things we need to do because we feel it's a waste of time. And this is the disease condition, that what is sweet is appearing very bitter. And what is bitter is appearing very sweet. Prabhupada says this in the Bhagavad Gita. He says that happiness in the mode of ignorance is bitter in the beginning and bitter at the end. It's painful in the beginning and it's painful at the end. Happiness in the mode of passion is sweet in the beginning. It's very, very pleasurable in the beginning, like illicit sex life or mature life. In the beginning, it seems very, very pleasurable, but then the result is very, very painful. Nectar in the beginning, but poison at the end. So mode of ignorance is poison in the beginning, poison at the end. No pleasure in the beginning or end. It's just such low modes that we take pleasure to be pain. Mode of passion is pleasure in the beginning, but poison at the end. And mode of goodness is nectar in the beginning and nectar in the end. So right now, our state is more of passion, that we are taking what is nectarian to be bitter. Mode of goodness, is right now, because we're not on the transcendental level, it is poison in the beginning. It's bitter in the beginning, but it's nectar at the end. So right now we're taking what we feel is nectarian, but it'll be bitter at the end. But what Rupa Goswami is saying here is that right now chanting may feel bitter, but it'll be nectar at the end. So from goodness to Shuddha Sattva, right, to pure goodness. So if we chant, and it's very unpalatable, but if we keep chanting, it will become very, very nectarian. And why is this example of jaundice so perfect? Prabhupada explains it's the perfect example because when we have jaundice, when we eat rock candy or sugar candy, it feels very bitter. So in the disease condition, what is sweet appears very bitter. Now the cure of jaundice is that to actually eat sugar candy. Sugar candy itself is a cure. So you keep sucking on the sugar candy, and from being very bitter and being a great austerity, when you keep sucking on it, it becomes more and more and more sweet, to the point that one day you realize the sweetness of that sugar candy. In the same way, when we keep chanting and we keep chanting and we keep chanting, then it becomes so tasty, it becomes so palatable, that then we do even more than what is required. Right now, actually, I'm visiting the home of a devotee who chants 64 rounds every day. He wakes up at 3 in the morning every day, and he chants 64 rounds every day. I won't tell his name because he doesn't want people to know this. I just happen to know this because I'm staying at his home. But the point is that he becomes disturbed if I tell this to others. So the point is that this devotee has been chanting since many years, and that taste has increased. And because they've been chanting in a very humble mood, in an offenseless mood, and with sincerity, and also reading the scriptures and also serving, that taste has come. And now that chanting of 64 rounds is not a burden, but it's very, very pleasurable for this devotee. And this is what we are aspiring for, that disease will gradually reduce. And the more he's chanted, the more he chants, the sweeter it's over time become. And so now, therefore, chanting 64 rounds is very easy. Whereas for some of us, chanting 16 rounds is so difficult. So the way to chant is to chant. The way to chant more is to chant more. We just have to keep chanting. So that's the first point about chanting, that we have to keep chanting. Just like to cure jaundice, all you have to do is just keep sucking the sugar candy. And then now we'll see Rupa Goswami will also tell another point that goes along with this. We have to keep chanting, but also we have to do one more thing. The real disease is in the heart. If the mind is cleansed, however, if consciousness is cleansed, a person cannot be harmed by the material disease. To cleanse the mind and heart from all misconceptions, one should take to this chanting of the Hare Krishna Mahamantra. The chanting purifies the heart, Cheto Darpana Marjana. It cleanses the heart. This is both easy and beneficial. By chanting the holy name of the Lord, one is immediately freed from the blazing fire of material existence. There are 3 stages in chanting the holy name of the Lord. The offensive stage, the stage of lessening offenses, and the pure stage. When a neophyte takes to the chanting of the Hare Krishna mantra, he generally commits many offenses. There are 10 basic offenses, and if the devotee avoids these offenses, he can glimpse the next stage, which is situated between offensive chanting and pure chanting. When one attains the pure stage, he is immediately liberated. This is called Bhava Mahadavagni Nirvapanam. Bhava Mahadavagni Nirvapanam. As soon as one is liberated from the blazing fire of material existence, he can relish the taste of transcendental life. So first point here, Prabhupada is saying that by chanting, we become free from the blazing fire of material existence, meaning that we immediately get relief. We immediately get relief. And it's actually a fact, this devotee, again, it's amazing that I'm at this person's home and at the same time we're reading these verses. This devotee actually cured a very terrible disease. simply by his chanting. Of course, he also followed the doctor's recommendations. He did everything that the doctors did. But when the doctors were doing, it wasn't making much progress. Like he was not winning over the disease by their methods. And then out of great sincerity, he just started chanting. He realized, I remember about 3 or 4 years ago, he actually called me once. And he said, my realization is that the holy name is the only cure for any disease. Actually, all diseases, he said this, all diseases can be cured by the holy name. And I didn't know that he had started chanting after that 64 rounds. But after that, when he got that very deep realization, he started chanting. And it's actually a fact that his chanting cured him. And it may or may not cure, because the main disease that the chanting is curing is the material disease. But the fact is that when we start chanting, and this is a fact, the blazing fire of material existence is reduced. Like our life becomes less troublesome. The fire goes down. It becomes a bit peaceful. And many devotees have said this. One devotee was suffering from mental trauma. She was very, very traumatized because, she lost her husband, and it was a whole thing, very and very in a very traumatic way. All these things happened, and so she was actually going mad, and she started chanting 64 rounds every day, and she did that for a few months, and it cured her. It cured everything. It brought her life together. She never got her husband back. It's not that through the chanting all of a sudden the husband appeared, or something. But what she got was that strength. What she got was the strength to transcend that material situation. So any situation, a physical situation like a disease, a mental situation, can be cured, can be softened, or can be adjusted by this chanting. And so the real solution to our problems is chanting. And when I was on Brajamandal Parikrama, it's very austere there, it's very difficult there. Then Hanumat Preshak Maharaj, this is one thing he would tell everyone. When they would really struggle, he would say, don't think, just chant. Don't think, just chant. So chanting is what's going to really solve our problems. We have to think less, chant more. Of course, think also, but chant more. So now here, Prabhupada is mentioning about the offenses against the holy name, and how this is very important to avoid these offenses. Because we may chant, the flip side of this is that we may chant, but if we think that by my pure chanting, I can conquer Krishna due to my sadhana, because my sadhana is so good, I'm better than other devotees, or I can offend devotees, or I can neglect the regulated principles, then also we can fall down. If we think that our sadhana will make us into pure devotees, and we don't need the devotees' mercy and shelter, then that can also cause fall down. And I saw this also, that there's one temple, one place, that this devotee had perfect sadhana. Every single morning he was there at 3 a.m, chanting his rounds before Mangalartik and everything, perfect sadhana. Yet after a few years, devotees saw that this devotee fell down. He had a fall down. And the problem there was almost that his sadhana was too perfect. He forgot the purpose. He lost the forest for the trees. And this is when we are in some ways trying to be too perfect. This can also be an anartha. And which one is this? Which is the one principle that Rupa Goswami has just mentioned in one of the previous verses, that has warned us not to go that route, not to go down that route either? Who can say?
Niyamagraha.
Yes, very nice. Niyamagraha. Then that we can do rules only for the sake of following the rules. We can be chanting for the sake of just for the sake of following the rules rather than wanting to get Krishna's mercy, wanting to get the devotees' mercy. So lessening offenses, very important. We have the offensive stage, which is nama parad. We have the stage of lessening offenses, which is nama bhas. And we have the pure stage, which is shuddha nam. A kanishadikari is at the stage of nama parad. A madhyamadikari is the stage of nama bhas. Remember, there are still offenses, but you're trying to avoid them. And therefore, the reflection of the holy name becomes manifest in your heart. And the highest stage is Shuddhanam, and that is the stage of the Uttamadikari devotee. And I'm going to come back to this 10 offenses. The conclusion is that in order to get freed from the material disease, one must take to the chanting of the Hare Krishna mantra. The Krishna consciousness movement is especially meant for creating an atmosphere in which people can take to the chanting of the Hare Krishna mantra. So all activities, Prabhupada here is saying, every activity that we do is meant to create an atmosphere where we can chant the Hare Krishna mantra. And Prabhupada therefore says that every activity that we do has to be associated or accompanied by the chanting of the Hare Krishna mantra. Therefore, we should not invest our time in activities that are not so connected with chanting. Like someone may want to organize, let's say, a food festival at a temple. And different, and it's a very nice way. It invites a lot of people, different, and the Krishna Prasadam is distributed. But we should not take it to the point where we are not chanting ourselves and others are not chanting. So we do a food festival, but we should also have a stage there where people are chanting. We should also, after serving them prasad, we should also give them some experience of kirtan. We should give them some books. We should also do that. We are doing all the activities for this purpose of chanting because it's our most important activity. Other forms of devotional service are devotional service. But in this age, our Yuga Dharma is this Harinam Sankirtan. And if we don't engage in this Harinam Sankirtan, then we won't get the opportunity again to do this for thousands of lifetimes because we will have neglected our most important business. And when we increase our chanting, we will naturally increase our service more. We will want to serve more. We will increase our service to the devotees more. But it has to be accompanied by chanting. Chanting has to be our focus in all activities. And this is important. This principle can never be minimized. We have to, both forms of chanting, which is japa and sankirtan, not just japa, but also sankirtan, and not just sankirtan, but also japa. One must begin with faith, and when this faith is increased by chanting, a person can become a member of the society. We are sending sankirtan parties all over the world, and they're experiencing that even in the remotest part of the world, where there's no knowledge of Krishna, the Hare Krishna Mahamantra attracts thousands of men to our camp. In some areas, people begin to imitate the devotees by shaving their heads and chanting the Hare Krishna Mahamantra, only a few days after hearing the mantra. This may be imitative, but imitation of a good thing is desired. Similarly, imitators gradually become interested in being initiated by the spiritual master and offering themselves for initiation. So on this point, I should mention that Halloween is coming up, and two people for their Halloween dressed up as Hare Krishna devotees. And they dressed up like them, they shaved their head, and they went door to door. It is like a big thing. And the funny thing is that then both of them also became devotees. So Prabhupada is saying, even by imitation on Halloween, someone is dressing up like a devotee, that person will become a devotee. If one is sincere, he's initiated, and this stage is called bhajana kriya. So I'm going to skip this because I'm going to talk about this. Okay, yeah. So this point I wanted to say, it's only 3 paragraphs. I'll just read it. If one is sincere, he is initiated, and this stage is called bhajana kriya. One then actually engages in the service of the Lord by regularly chanting the Hare Krishna Mahamantra 16 rounds daily and refraining from illicit sex, intoxication, meat eating, and gambling. By bhajana kriya, one attains freedom from the contamination of materialistic life. He no longer goes to a restaurant or hotel to taste so-called palatable dishes made with meat and onions, nor does he care to smoke or drink tea or coffee. He not only refrains from illicit sex, but avoids sex life entirely. Nor is he interested in wasting his time in speculating or gambling. In this way, it is to be understood that one is becoming cleansed of unwanted things, anartha nivritti. The word anartha refers to unwanted things. Anarthas are vanquished when one becomes attached to the Krishna consciousness movement. Anarthas are vanquished when one becomes attached to the Krishna consciousness movement. So we should never leave this movement also. When a person is relieved from unwanted things, he becomes fixed in executing his Krishna conscious activities. Indeed, he becomes attached to such activities and experiences ecstasy in executing devotional service. This is called bhava, the preliminary awakening of dormant love of Godhead. Thus, the conditioned soul becomes free from material existence and loses interest in the bodily conception of life, including material opulence, material knowledge, and material attraction of all variety. At such a time, one can understand who the Supreme Personality of Godhead is and what his Maya is. And then final paragraph, although Maya may be present, it cannot disturb a devotee once he attains the bhava stage. Very key point here. This is because the devotee can see the real position of Maya. So at the stage of bhava, one cannot fall down completely. One cannot be disturbed by Maya. There still can be some temporary fall down, like we see in the case of Bharat Maharaj. But he never lost his Krishna consciousness. He never forgot his Krishna consciousness. He had to take a birth as a deer because he made a mistake. Offenses can still take place on the stage of bhava, but one can never be attracted to material life again at the stage of bhava. And Bharat Maharaj's fall down was actually due to his offense to his spiritual master. It was not just because of his attraction to the deer. So offenses can still stay on that stage. Still some material attraction could stay. Some temporary fall down can be there, but Maya cannot actually overcome a person on the stage of bhava. Maya means forgetfulness of Krishna, and forgetfulness of Krishna and Krishna consciousness stand side by side like light and shadow. If one remains in shadow, he cannot enjoy the facilities offered by light. And if one remains in light, he cannot be disturbed by the darkness of shadow. By taking to Krishna consciousness, one gradually becomes liberated and remains in light. Indeed, he does not even touch the darkness. As confirmed in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, Madhya 22:31, Krishna Surya Sama Maya Haya Andakar, Yahan Krishna Tahan Nahi Maya Adhikar. Krishna is compared to the sunshine and Maya is compared to darkness. Wherever there is sunshine, there cannot be darkness. As soon as one takes to Krishna consciousness, the darkness of illusion, the influence of the external energy will immediately vanquish. So here Prabhupada is mentioning how the two cannot stay together. We cannot be like, I'll continue my material life and I will also do my spiritual life. The two cannot stay together because one is like light and the other is darkness. The very definition of light is that there will not be darkness. And the definition of darkness is that there won't be light. So if there's Krishna, if Krishna is there, then these unwanted things cannot be there. One cannot be, on the stage of not following the 4 regulated principles and still be chanting purely. It's impossible. And therefore, those who claim to do are false gurus. They're false because the two cannot be together. If someone is spiritually advanced, the material life has to go. It has to vanish entirely. So one who's on that spiritual path has that. So in order to experience the sweetness of sugar candy, in order to experience the sweetness of Krishna's name, one has to do three things that are mentioned here. The first one is one has to chant. There's no way we're going to be cured from jaundice if we don't suck the sugar candy. First thing is one has to chant. If we're not going to chant, the discussion can't even start. One has to chant. The second thing is that one has to avoid offenses, from offensive to lessening offenses to offenseless. So the second thing is one has to avoid offenses. And we've talked about these first two things. But the third thing is, and that's mentioned here in the translation, Prabhupada doesn't discuss it so much in this purport, that is, one has to carefully chant the holy names. One has to chant attentively. That's the third thing. One has to chant attentively. And there's one very nice class by Bhakti Chaitanya Swami, who I believe right now is our GBC chairman of this ISKCON movement, right now, currently, presently. He's given a very nice class on the 3 laws of chanting. 3 laws. So, when law means it's a law, it doesn't mean it's a recommendation or this. He says there's 3 laws for good chanting. And all of us, we all have this question. Every sannyasi, after every class is asked this question. It's so just so almost funny. You see every time this question comes up, and that is, how can I improve my chanting? How can I chant? My mind goes everywhere. So he has his 3 laws of good chanting. The first law is, if you want to chant purely, chant attentively, chant with attention. That's the first law. The second law is chant attentively. And the third law is chant attentively. So the 3 laws for chanting are that we must chant with attention. And I also struggle a lot with my chanting. I'll be very candid here. And the amazing thing is that after I heard that, my chanting actually improved. I've attended so many chanting seminars, this chanting japa retreats, this, that. And I can honestly say that nothing helped me more than these 3 laws of chanting. And I recognize that now, when I just realized that, no, I have to chant with attention, that when I'm chanting, that's all I'm doing. That's all I'm thinking. And when I chant with attention, then it works. Then you get some taste. Then you're feeling like you're chanting. Why is this? Because the Nama is a person. Krishna is a person. So if we ignore Krishna, then we're ignoring a person. If we ignore the chanting, if we're not chanting attentively, it's like being with a child, but not giving them any attention. They feel very, very hurt. My daughter, she would, if I was sitting next to her with my laptop, she was like 2 years old, she would come to the laptop and she would slam it closed. She would try to close it. She would think, this is so annoying. Like my father, he's there, but he's never there with me. He's always on his laptop or on the phone or this or that. So when we are dealing with a person, it's all about our attention. So the same thing is with the holy name of Krishna. So very important points. 3 laws, 3 japa laws. Yes, thank you for sharing that class. I actually didn't hear that class initially myself. I heard it through the mouth of His Holiness Romapada Swami. He was quoting that class, and he was telling us that how nice that class is. So I think other devotees have also agreed that this is something very, very, very special. So we have to chant with attention. Okay, so this purport is so special. I don't know, it just had a very deep impact on my life personally. So I wanted to read it in its entirety, even though it's a bit long. I apologize if some of you found it to be a little long or boring. Sorry, I'm just, sorry. Here, second. So now I have only a few slides for today. So now I'm going to switch over to my slides so that we can, on this verse, I just have a few slides so we can cover some of the key points here. So this whole theme of this purport is spiritual happiness versus material happiness. So Rupa Goswami is telling us that how can we give up our greed for material happiness? This is the thing that all of us, we struggle with. I at least struggle with every single day. Like sometimes in the mind, such horrible, I just thinking about this morning, that such horrible material desires come. And you're like, where did this come from? And we want to satisfy those desires. Sometimes we are craving for material things and we think, how can I overcome this ever? This desire to enjoy material happiness. The only way, Rupa Goswami here is telling us the path, is to experience the sweetness of spiritual life, or rather experience spiritual happiness. And therefore now he's giving us the path to experience that spiritual happiness. The only way to do that is by chanting the holy names of Krishna and experiencing that sweet taste. So it solves all of our problems. It reduces the fire of material existence, but it also gives us a happiness by which we can actually give up our material happiness. So the whole theme of this verse is that it's giving us the path to a higher pleasure. And that Prabhupada touched on that one paragraph. He described how it takes us all the way, simply chanting, it takes us through all the stages of bhakti, from Shraddha to Sadhu Sangha to Bhajana Kriya to Anartha Nivritti. And then Prabhupada talked about the different offenses. These anarthas, these are not just offenses, but also material desires, which come from past sins, past piety, and offenses. These anarthas may come from past piety also. We're very attached to doing our pious thing, but we are not attached to serving Krishna. We are, due to past sins, we still have deep material desires. And due to offenses, we still cannot chant properly. So next slide is about offenses. The chanting will remove all the offenses in a person's heart, all sins, except for offenses that are against the holy name itself, which is a very important point. That if we have a bad habit of, not brushing our teeth in the morning, then by chanting, all those bad habits will go away. The only thing that doesn't go away is if we are offending the name itself, because, well, eventually with continuous chanting, even that will go away. But in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, it says, Bahu janme koriyare shavana kirtana tabutane pai Krishna kore premadhana. That could take millions of lifetimes. That could take millions of lifetimes. It says, you may go on chanting for millions of lifetimes, yet you won't get Krishna prema unless you avoid these offenses. So the offenses, the removal of the offenses has to be done conscientiously, not simply we can depend that it will be the result of my chanting. It will be the result, but then it may take millions of lifetimes. So we must conscientiously avoid offenses against the holy name, which we will see in our next slide. And then bhakti, it leads to, it also, anarthas come from devotion or bhakti that is not on the transcendental level. Bhaktis that come, that is mixed with ignorance, with passion, with even goodness, like the Bhagavatam describes. When we do bhakti for prestige, for wealth, for a comfortable position, that is bhakti in the mode of passion. So when we are from any four of these sources, anarthas may come. And chanting gradually removes all these anarthas, again, except for those against the holy name. Here, just as a side point, anarthas in general cause sleep, distraction, bad habits, mature taste, disinterest in mature topics. So with this one is wrong here. When we are these anarthas, we tend to sleep more, we're distracted, all these things. Anarthas from past sins, they cause ignorance, false ego, attachment, hatred, and fear of death. This should be interest in mature topics. Anarthas from past pious activities cause desire for pious enjoyment and for liberation. So even desires for pious enjoyment are an anartha, right? So we want, let me have my nice family and we'll all go to the temple and we'll all, so there's still some desire for enjoyment mixed with bhakti. If we are desiring those things, we may have those things, but if we still desire them, then they are still anarthas. And the final one is nishtha. From anartha nivritti, we come to the stage of nishtha in bhakti. And in the quality of bhakti, we have steadiness in body, mind, and words. Determination becomes easy. Steadiness in qualities refers to humility, giving respect, friendliness, mercifulness. So one may be steady in their bhakti, but one may not have all of these qualities. But still, nishtha means that one is steady in one's bhakti. The qualities actually come at the stage of nishtha or even higher. In higher stages of devotion, we develop these stages of nishtha. So now, with this sort of understanding that which stage offenses are at, these are the 10 offenses against the holy name, but all of you know the offenses against the holy name. We recite them every morning. So rather than focusing on just the offenses, we can focus on how to avoid those offenses. So here are the 10 ways to avoid the 10 offenses, or rather the 10 defenses against committing the 10 offenses of chanting the holy names. The first one is to serve those who serve the Lord, appreciate their good qualities. So the way to avoid blasphemy of a devotee is to serve the devotees, to not try to serve the Lord directly, but to serve the devotees and to appreciate their good qualities. The second one is adore Lord Krishna as a supreme enjoyer, controller, and friend. Respect great personalities such as Lord Shiva, Lord Brahma, Ganesh, and Hanuman as exalted devotees of the Lord, but you don't adore them, rather adore Krishna. Number 3, to avoid disobeying the orders of the spiritual master, carry out the orders of the spiritual master with enthusiasm and attention to detail. So we should carry out the orders of the spiritual master with enthusiasm. Enthusiasm means activity done with intelligence. Prabhupada defines enthusiasm as activity done with intelligence. So we have attention to detail. Not just enthusiastically, we are carrying out the spiritual master's order, but making a mess of it. We are also trying to do it in a way that is very, very pleasurable to Krishna and the spiritual master. Number 4, honor and study the scriptures as the instructions of the Supreme Lord. So rather than neglecting the scriptures, to honor and study the scriptures as the instructions of the Supreme Lord, and not to consider the glorification of the holy name given in these scriptures to be exaggeration, rather considering the descriptions of the holy names, descriptions of the glories of the holy name given by the acharyas and scriptures to be not even slightly exaggerated. So accepting them on face value. And this is actually also a fact that not just also in terms of the holy name, but also um, in general, in terms of our instructions of our spiritual master, who in general for us is Srila Prabhupada, to not consider their words to be exaggeration or just, not to take them literally or seriously, which is a mistake that in the modern world many of us are making, that we read the Bhagavatam and we say, oh, Prabhupada is just saying this because they wanted to make an impression or some historical context, not to be surrendered to the instruction of the spiritual master. So we should not blaspheme the scriptures, nor should we think that the descriptions given in the scriptures, particularly in relation to the holy name, are exaggerated. 6, to experience the holy name as transcendental sound descending from the spiritual world. So this is in response to trying to give some interpretation on the holy name, that, oh, the holy name is nice because it brings some mental relaxation. No, the holy name is descending from the spiritual world. It is non-different than Krishna. We should not give some mundane interpretation on the holy name. 7, protect your investment in chanting by following the regulated principles. So the 7th offense is the greatest offense against the holy name, along with the first offense. The 7th offense is when we sin on the strength of the holy name of the Lord. This is very, very sinful. All the chanting that we're doing, we can ruin its benefits if we're sinning on the strength of that holy name. So that's why it said here, protect your investment in chanting by following the regulated principles. Be greedy for advancing in spiritual life by not sinning on the strength of the holy name. 8, transcend feelings of duty and obligation and act for Krishna's pleasure. So this one is very interesting, that the chanting of the holy name of Krishna is not just another obligation or duty or ritualistic activities. So we should not think that chanting is just, but we should chant not out of duty, not out of obligation, not because it's our 16-round ritual every day, but we're chanting for Krishna's pleasure. We are chanting because this is the path to love of God. This is the ultimate thing. And it's an offense to consider chanting to be one of the auspicious ritualistic activities. So, I did this ritual, and then I also chanted. One of the many rituals that I do. This is not the right mood. 9, discuss the glories of the holy name with the servants of the Lord who relish them. So this is in response to the 9th offense, which is to instruct the faithless person about the glories of the holy name. We share the holy name with everyone, but we don't discuss the details of the greatness of the intricacies of the holy name with the materialist. We discuss these things only with those who can relish the holy name, with the devotees of the Lord. And finally, to not have complete faith in the chanting of the holy names and to maintain material attachments even after understanding so many instructions on this matter. So we have understood everything. We know that this is right, but we still don't want to take that leap and take shelter of the holy name. Because we're not taking that leap, we won't get the shelter of the holy name. Then we should not be surprised that we don't relish the holy name. So therefore, it's an offense to keep on sticking on to our attachments, even after Krishna has made it clear that he's given us his full mercy, that this is the right path, but we're still attached to drinking tea, still not giving our time and energy into devotional practices, but keeping our material life in the forefront. And it's also an offense to be inattentive while chanting. So therefore, the positive defense against it is chant attentively, absorbing the heart and mind in the holy name and becoming steadily more detached from materialism. This 10th offense is also, I think, one of the most important offenses to be avoided, because someone may say that, well, I'm not keeping any material attachments, even though I've understood so many instructions on this matter. Because I've understood this, I'm not keeping any material attachments. I'm, being very, very detached. But the fact is that if we are not chanting attentively, this means that I'm still holding on to my material attachments even after understanding so many instructions. Why? Because we have more faith in our material life than in the holy name. This is why when I'm chanting, my mind is going to my material life. And I used to think that, oh, this addition that we say, it's also an offense to be inattentive while chanting, that this was kind of added on there. But now I actually understand that this 10th offense, part of it includes this attentive chanting, or rather inattentive chanting. That why Prabhupada added it to this one, because actually it's the same offense. We don't chant attentively because even though we've understood so many instructions on this matter, we're still holding on to our material attachments. Otherwise, why not at that time would we just give our time to Krishna and focus on Krishna? Even after understanding so many instructions on this matter, we're still not chanting attentively. We're still not focusing wholly and solely on Krishna's holy names. And that's the 10th offense. So these are the 10 offenses to be avoided. So now we have covered this first verse. And I'll now be moving on to the second verse, which is shorter. So many points were discussed here on how we should also not desire pious material enjoyment. We should only desire the service of the Lord. Okay. Now text 8. Text 8, I will not read the whole purport. I'm just going to read the verse. I have more to say on it, which is, more like in terms of content. This 7th verse was a very simple point. We should just chant. So I felt Prabhupada was making that point better than I could make it. And he always makes it better than I can make it. But I have very little realization on that point. So I was just referring to Prabhupada's purport. On these verses, there's some more technical points that are more suitable for slides. So that's why I made some slides on this. Tannama rupa charitadi sukirtananu smrityo kramena rasanama nasi niyojya tishtan vraje tadanuragi jananugami kalam nayet akhilam iti upadesha saram. The essence of all advice is that one should utilize one's full time, 24 hours a day, in nicely chanting and remembering the Lord's divine name, transcendental form, qualities, and eternal pastimes, thereby gradually engaging one's tongue and mind. In this way, one should reside in Braja, Golok Vrindavan Dham, and serve under the guidance of devotees. One should follow in the footsteps of the Lord's beloved devotees who are deeply attached to his devotional service. You all can see the screen, right? The database.
Yes, Prabhuji.
Yes, Prabhuji.
So the essence of all advice, so this is the essence here, is that one should utilize one's full time, 24 hours a day, in nicely chanting and remembering the Lord's divine name, transcendental form, qualities, and eternal pastimes, thereby gradually engaging one's tongue and mind. In this way, one should reside in Braja, Golok Vrindavan Dham, and serve Krishna under the guidance of devotees. One should follow in the footsteps of the Lord's beloved devotees who are deeply attached to his devotional service. So, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, in his commentary, in his Bhagavatam commentary, he mentions that there's that among all the different processes of bhakti, the highest process is hearing and chanting. And within hearing and chanting, there are three different ways we can hear and chant. We can chant about Krishna's qualities and hear about his qualities. We can hear and chant about, so that's guna. We can hear and chant about his leelas, his pastimes, and we can hear and chant his nama, his name. And so the devotee engages in all three forms of hearing and chanting. He hears and chants about Krishna's qualities, his pastimes, and his holy name. This is why we read Srimad Bhagavatam. This is why we are discussing the pastimes of Krishna, because it's a form of hearing and chanting. It's very important. And then Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur further goes on to make the point that that among these three, the most important and the most potent in this day and age is chanting of the name of Krishna. So we have to do all three, he says, but of the three, the most important, the most potent is the chanting of the name of Krishna. Among the guna, leelas, and nama, the nama is most important. So we should never give up that chanting. In fact, we should try to chant 24 hours a day. And I was going to mention this in the last one, I forgot, it slipped my mind, that how the last verse focused on the contrast between material happiness and spiritual happiness, right? And how through chanting we can overcome the material happiness. The living example of this is Srila Haridas Thakur, where he is the only devotee, or rather I should say he's the greatest devotee, who was able to overcome his material enjoyment so deeply. He was so deep in his chanting, he was able to overcome his material desires so perfectly that even Maya Devi herself, when she came, she became Haridas Thakur's disciple. And he was the one devotee who chanted 24 hours a day, 192 rounds, 192 rounds every single day. And among all the devotees of Lord Chaitanya, Maya Devi got her final defeat with Haridas Thakur, and she was so attracted to his devotion, his bhakti to the Lord, that she became his disciple. Maya Devi is the disciple of Haridas Thakur. So twice, the first time when the prostitute comes, Haridas Thakur liberates the prostitute and shows how he has no interest in this sex life, any form of sex life. He's fully transcendental. And it was simply due to his desire to fulfill his vow in chanting that he converted that prostitute into a devotee. And then later on, as though that was not enough of a test, Maya Devi herself comes and tries to stop his chanting, but rather he makes Maya Devi into a devotee and his own disciple. So this is 24 hours a day. And then if we do this 24 hours a day, Prabhupada is making this connection, Rupa Goswami is making this connection very clear, then one can reside in Braja, in Golok Vrindavan Dham. That becomes our key to the spiritual world. And there we can serve under the guidance of devotees. We can follow in the footsteps of the residents of Vrindavan. In one class, His Holiness Radhanath Maharaj, he says that how when we can overcome the offenses against the holy name, then we can actually relish Krishna's pastimes. Which means that if we can become free from offenses, if we can stop offending devotees, if we can give up our offensive mentality, we can stop these offenses, we can actually gain entrance. That is what gets us entrance into the Leelas of Krishna. So simply, if we have the greed to enter the Leelas of Krishna, we will give up our offenses because that's the price we have to pay. And we talked about this last class. So if we can simply give up our material desires and chant all the time, and we can then reside in Golok Vrindavan and serve Krishna under the guidance of the devotees. At the same time, we have to follow in the footsteps of the Lord's beloved devotees who are deeply attached to his holy name. So we also cannot start chanting 24 hours a day immediately because we are not on that level. And the devotees know that, the pure devotees know that, therefore they have given us a path to follow in the footsteps of the Lord's devotees. They've given us a path and we should follow in those footsteps. At our initial stages, we can only chant 16 rounds. Therefore, Prabhupada said we have to chant 16 rounds. But we can do so many other services. We can serve Krishna. So Bhaktivinoda Thakur says that spiritual life means honesty, honesty with oneself. So if we actually know we're not on that level, how can we imitate Haridas Thakur? How can we chant 24 hours a day? We cannot. And in one lecture, Prabhupada therefore says, this is why we have given so many services in our movement. He says, because we know that you cannot chant 24 hours a day. And therefore we have given so many services so that you can be engaged 24 hours a day in the Lord's service. Because until we are not pure, we need variety. We cannot just do the same service because we don't have that taste. So Prabhupada created so many services so we could serve Krishna 24 hours a day. And we can rise to that platform where one day we can just chant. And even on that day, we may choose not just to chant, but we maybe feel compassionate and want to preach Krishna's message. So Prabhupada obviously was happy just to chant all day, but he was preaching for our benefit, and we need to follow in his footsteps. So in this purport, Prabhupada quotes Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. And Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur is quoting Bhaktivinoda Thakur and Bhaktivinoda Thakur's Jaiva Dharma, in which he talks about the successive stages of meditation, how we can become deeper and deeper in our chanting. So first of all, key point to note is that Rupa Goswami is saying that the mind has to be engaged in the Lord's service because the mind is very powerful. And Arjuna in the Gita also realizes this point, that his mind is very turbulent and he needs help in controlling his mind. And that's what Krishna tells him, that the way you can do this is through practice and detachment. And then by doing this, we can attain one of the 5 rasas. So Prabhupada says, Chaitanya Charitamrita advises those who are neophytes to give up all kinds of motivated desires and simply engage in the regulated devotional service of the Lord, according to the directions of Scripture. In this way, a neophyte can gradually develop attachment for Krishna's name, the fame, form, qualities, and so forth. When one has developed such attachment, he can spontaneously serve the lotus feet of Krishna, even without following the regulated principles. On this point, I want to mention how Prabhupada once or twice, he just threw a sweet ball in his mouth directly in the kitchen before it was offered. So he was on that level, that even without following the regulated principles, which he always followed, but once in a while showed how he was beyond them, even if they don't follow the regulated principles, they spontaneously serve the lotus feet of Krishna. They don't do so, but they have no reason not to do so. They set an example for the whole world. So they actually follow them very nicely. But even if they did not, they are on the level of spontaneously serving the lotus feet of Krishna. This stage is called Raga Bhakti, or devotional service in spontaneous love. At that stage, the devotee can follow in the footsteps of one of the eternal associates of Krishna in Vrindavan. This is called Raganuga Bhakti. Raganuga Bhakti, or spontaneous devotional service, can be executed in the Shanta Rasa when one aspires to be like Krishna's cows, or the stick or flute in the hand of Krishna, or the flowers around Krishna's neck. In the Dasya Rasa, one follows in the footsteps of servants like Chitraka, Patraka, or Raktaka. In the friendly Sakya Ras, one can become a friend like Baladeva, Sridama, or Sudama. In Vatsalya Ras, characterized by parental affection, one can become like Nanda Maharaj and Yashoda. And in Madhurya Ras, characterized by conjugal love, one can become like Srimati Radharani or her lady friends, such as Lalita, and her serving maids, the Manjaris, like Rupa and Rati. This is the essence of all instruction in the matter of devotional service. So, on that stage of Raga Bhakti, one aspires to be a cow or a stick or a flowers or a stone in Vrindavan, depending on the rasa that one is. And in different rasas, we aspire to be like different devotees. Here it's being mentioned. And when we're on that level, Prabhupada writes, this purport is actually very special. So please, everyone, read it. Read it multiple times. Prabhupada describes how the spiritual master reveals the svarupa of the disciple when that disciple is ready. The spiritual master actually will indicate to the disciple, will give the disciple the vision, the knowledge from within the heart as to how they're supposed to serve the Lord. So this is, it comes naturally and spontaneously when we develop attachment for Krishna's name, fame, form, and qualities. Then we spontaneously love Krishna. That's the kids in the back, sorry. So now the question is, well, how do we do it? And this is the practical part, the part that I like to discuss a lot. This is very nice. In the purport, Prabhupada mentions different stages which are mentioned by Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, which are mentioned by Bhaktivinoda Thakur in his Jaiva Dharma, as I mentioned. So we have these stages of meditation of a devotee. These are successive stages of advancement and meditation on Krishna's name. The first one is Shravana Dasha. Shravana Dasha. So in the stage of Shravana Dasha, one is attached to hearing about Krishna, Shravana Dasha. There's constant hearing of Krishna's name, form, qualities, pastimes, and teachings. This is the stage most of us are at. We just need to constantly hear. We're driving the car, so don't waste the time. Put on a class on your iPhone, plug it in, and listen. Hear it. We're in the bathroom, brushing our teeth. Turn your phone on and listen to a class. Constantly try to hear Krishna's name, form, qualities, pastimes. In every moment that we have, we should try to hear and chant. Then the second stage is Varana Dasha. Varana Dasha, if you can't see my slides, let me know. Varana Dasha, this is the stage where due to constant hearing, we become attached to hearing. Like many of you are. You are willing to tolerate a speaker like me simply because you are attached to hearing about Rupa Goswami and hearing about Krishna because of your attachment to Krishna's instructions and his qualities. And this stage is sort of mixed spontaneous, where one is attached, but at the same time, one also is not completely purified. One still has to push oneself to do it. There's substantial faith, but frail spiritual greed and immature knowledge. The meditation is unsystematic and tainted with mundane topics, being imitated without spiritual greed. So, like when we associate with devotees, we'd like to talk about Krishna, but we also mix it with some mundane topics. We are also not systematic in that hearing. Like hearing, we're attached to it, but we are unsystematic. It's not constant. Constant means taila dhara. When it flows like oil. It doesn't flow like water. Then the third stage is smarana vastha. On this stage, the devotee is, after hearing and chanting continuously, is now remembering the Lord. Smarana vastha. They're remembering the Lord. They are chanting in ecstasy. In this stage, one has great submission and determination, great submission to the Lord and his devotees, firm determination. And one has not actually realized one's spiritual body, but one knows one's spiritual body. One's spiritual form has been revealed to the devotee, but the devotee does not actually know his spiritual form on that stage. So this is on the stage where we are still using our material mind, and we're employing our mind in bringing the form of the Lord within our mind. But one has not moved beyond, one is not completely free of the material mind. So there is a spiritual greed, but it's not so strong. There is meditation and attachment to hearing, but that hearing is also sometimes mixed with mundane topics, and it's not completely spontaneous. So in this third stage, now there's different levels. There's different levels of smarana dasha. The first level is that one is remembering the Lord, but it is not continuous. It is unsystematic, and one is remembering different pastimes from time to time. There's no connection between one pastime and the other, and one is hearing different pastimes simply to cultivate one's attachment and eagerness for Krishna. So this is the interrupted form of smaranavastha. Then you have the uninterrupted form, which is now moving a step higher, form of smarana vastha, and that is absorption. In this stage, one starts meditating on entire days of Krishna's pastimes, one pastime on another. There's a deep meditation on Krishna's leelas, and the meditation is not interrupted, but is uninterrupted throughout the day. One's remembering Krishna. And then there's more concentrated meditation. This is when we make the we become very attracted to Krishna, and we are now trying to attract Krishna to our mind. And so the mind is used like a hook that catches a fish. It's a very odd example in some ways, but Krishna is like the fish, the mind is like the hook. So the mind is used as a means to attract the Lord, as one attracts a fish to a hook. But Prabhupada has used it, so we can use it as well. Krishna enters into the mind of this devotee because he's so attracted by that devotee's affection, meditation on the Lord. But the devotional service is still on the level of the mind, not completely on the level of the heart. Then the fourth stage is anusmriti, which is an expanded and constant meditation. Sorry. Yes, no, this one is, yeah, this is the fourth stage. Sorry. It's expanded and all day there's the meditation. All day there's this meditation on the Lord. And then we have stage 3, part 5, the final part of this stage, which is samadhi. And this samadhi is still with the materially conditioned life. So it's still a intentional samadhi. One is still pushing the mind into a complete absorption of the Lord. This is when the mind forcibly is engaged upon the form of the Lord. This is called nirbija yoga, or lifeless yoga. So it is still, even on this high stage, it is still lifeless. Imagine, I think when I read this, I feel so small. Where am I at? You know, this stage is far, far away, but even this stage is is Nirbija Yoga or lifeless yoga, for the yogi does not automatically engage in the personal service of the Lord. So the devotee is not automatically engaging in the direct personal service of the Lord. One's mind is being brought to that service. One is mentally trying to do that service, and therefore it's still not there completely. And then the fourth stage, finally. So we did the 5 parts of the third stage. The fourth stage is actual samadhi. This is apana dasha. And on this stage, on this fourth stage, one understands one's original constitutional position. So one fully understands that I am a servant of Krishna, this is who I am. One's spiritual body descends from the spiritual platform along with Krishna and his associates. One has, it's like a spiritual television in the heart. One has a spiritual television in the heart and lives in the world while engaging in a spiritual body in perfection. So in this stage, within the heart, one can actually see the Lord and his pastimes. One is not simply, one simply does not have the theoretical knowledge of one's eternal relationship, but one is actually acting in that relationship. He is living in the spiritual world. He is there in the spiritual world. He's like we are having this class over Zoom, right? We're actually together through Zoom. So he's there with Krishna through the heart, but he's living externally in the material world, all the while serving Krishna internally in the spiritual world. This is the fourth stage of samadhi. And this samadhi is of the fourth stage is different than the fifth stage of the third stage. That is the previous samadhi, which was a samadhi that is brought about by mentally focusing the mind. In the beginning, the mind is employed in attracting the form of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. That is mental samadhi. It is employed in attracting the form of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. But in the higher stages, there's no question of using the mind. When one is constantly thinking of the Lord, that is called living yoga. So rather than dead yoga, now we are on the stage of living yoga. This is what Queen Kunti says, Gange Vogham Udanvati. That let my mind flow to you. She's not trying to push Krishna into her mind. She's saying, let my mind flow to you, like the Ganges River flows to the ocean. No one pushes the river in that direction. The river rushes in that direction. Rather, they may try to push the river in the other direction, right? When you have to row uphill or against the current. You never row in the current. Then the current takes you. So that's the difference between the mind, mental samadhi. You're rowing the boat towards Krishna. But in spiritual samadhi, the current of your love of God is taking you towards Krishna. So it's flowing with the stream, not against the stream. And that is the fifth stage. On this fifth stage, you have the stages Sampati Dasha. Sampati Dasha is the stage where one Sampati literally means inheritance. One understands very clearly and perfectly one's eternal relationship with Krishna. And Radha and Krishna, they come to the devotee personally. They interact with the devotee personally, like we hear in the story of Sanatana Goswami, where Radharani comes to veil him from the hot sun. And with her own chadar, she makes an umbrella for him. And this seva is not just going in the mind. It's this fifth stage, right? We said now we're beyond the mind. It's going on the actual personal stage. One lives in the spiritual world and engages the material body to help the conditioned souls in the material world. Radha and Krishna are actually coming to that devotee. Prabhupada mentioned this a few times in his pastimes. One time he was in the Los Angeles courtyard, which he loved very much. It's still called Prabhupada's garden. And there he was speaking with some guests, with some devotees. And when they left, he asked the devotees there, he said, didn't you see Krishna and Balaram were playing here? The devotee said, no, we didn't see. He said, no, Krishna and Balaram were playing here in this garden. So the Krishna and Balaram actually were coming to this pure devotee, Srila Prabhupada, this greatest of all devotees. And Prabhupada didn't have to think of them. He wasn't like, let me think of Radha and Krishna's pastimes. No, Krishna and Balaram were coming there and performing their pastimes in front of him. He was seeing their pastimes face to face. Prabhupada says, when we become a pure devotee of the Lord, we see Krishna face to face, like I am seeing you and you are seeing me. He says the goal of this Krishna consciousness movement is to enter into the dancing party of Krishna. He says this in the song, in the purport to the song written by Narottam Das Thakur. And he says the goal of this Krishna consciousness movement is to enter the dancing party of Krishna, which means to enter the Rasa Leela of Krishna and to see Krishna face to face, like I am seeing you and you are seeing me. And the goal is nothing less than this. This I added at the end, Prabhupada doesn't say this, but we should be convinced the goal is not that we just become, slightly advanced devotees. Goal is to get to that point. And that's the goal that Prabhupada has in mind for us. Now, how sincere we are, that is up to us. But that's the goal he has in mind for us. In this stage, we're seeing how the devotee gives up the mind. So this is a point we covered in the Gita, how Krishna says that how the devotee with a strong weapon of detachment, with the strong axe of detachment, he cuts the knots of this material world. But then after doing that, he throws away that axe and he serves the Lord just with his heart. That's the way of the mind. The mind is still a material element, right? It's a material element. So we use the mind to continuously become absorbed in Krishna. And our mind and intelligence become like that axe that cuts the bonds of this material world. It's only through the mind that we will actually make advancement in spiritual life. Therefore, mind is situated in the mode of goodness. It's created from the mode of goodness. But once the mind has achieved that goal of absorbing us in Krishna's service, the heart takes over, the soul takes over, and the material mind is rejected. It's thrown away. So the gopis are not serving Krishna with their minds. They're not, using this mind to serve Krishna. They're serving Krishna with their hearts. There's one saying that you could say the Hopi Indians, the tribals, they had this saying where they said, only the white devil thinks with his head. But the devotee, in their words, the good person, the spiritual person, he thinks with his heart. So the whole material civilization is a result of thinking with our head, right? All this intellectual knowledge, all of this material civilization, we're thinking too much in terms of calculations and this and that. But real spirituality is from the heart. It's not from the head or the mind. So this is Sampati Dasha, the stage of completely giving up the material mind and seeing Krishna's pastimes with the spiritual body. This fifth stage was shown when Dhruva sees Vishnu. Initially, Dhruva sees Vishnu, but where does he see Vishnu? He sees Vishnu within his heart. So that was the fourth stage. He was seeing the Lord, but he was still seeing the Lord within his heart. Then when he makes more advancement, what happens? Krishna comes outside in front of him, shakes his hand. Hare Krishna, I'm here. That is the fifth stage. Seeing Krishna face to face. That is the stage Srila Prabhupada exhibited also. I gave you the example of Krishna and Balaram. Then there's also one auditorium where they performed a wonderful festival. Prabhupada said that Narad Muni was there. All the great sages were there. Lord Chaitanya, sometimes he said that Lord Chaitanya was there. So he's constantly observing the Lord, not within his heart, but outside in front of him. And that's this stage. So this, the example that our acharyas give, this is all bhakti, but these stages are like taking the milk and making it thicker and thicker and thicker and thicker, to the point that it finally becomes barfi. It becomes sandesh. So we all have the milk. This is the process of devotional service, but it's up to us which stage we want to be on. And when we become very greedy to come to the stage of bhava, we will automatically start giving up our material desires. We will automatically start, we will stop offending devotees, because we will see that I have so much to lose if I do this. And if I do it, I have so much to gain. If this is the small price I have to pay to come to the level of bhava, then why not pay that price? Isn't it? If Rupa Goswami, this is why doing Bhakti Shastri is so wonderful. Reading these books are so wonderful. He's clearly laying it out. He's saying that if you do these things, and if you don't do these things, you come to the stage of bhava. So now we know how to come to the stage of bhava. So we will think, in our right mind, we'll think, if this is the small price I have to pay to come to the level of bhava, why don't I do that? And I'm really preaching to myself when I say this, because this is a question I ask myself, that why I don't do this, if this is what I need to do to get to this stage. And how wonderful is this stage? If I could see Krishna's pastimes, wouldn't all my problems be solved? Wouldn't I not be offended by anyone in this world? If I was living in the spiritual world, wouldn't I not care about any material problem or situation or any material relationship or person? I would care for them out of compassion, but nothing would disturb me. And therefore we see that when Prabhupada was dealing so perfectly in this world, it wasn't simply because he was a communication expert. It wasn't because, like Time magazine said, he was one of the most 100 successful people in this world. It was because he was living in the spiritual world. So nothing in the material world could bother him. And we were just reading Lilamrit, and I was shocked actually to read this pastime. I missed it. I never read it before, where Prabhupada was on 26 Second Avenue. And in the beginning, when he was preaching, there's all these crazy people came. All these crazies would come, really like nutcases. They're all on LSD. And this one time he was doing this program right in the beginning days, and this really crazy man came up and sat right next to Prabhupada's Vyasasan. He came up and sat on the same dais. So Prabhupada had a very wide dais. It wasn't a Vyasasan. It was kind of like a table, a big table that he was sitting on. And he came up and sat right next to him. And then he looked towards Prabhupada in a very like aggressive way, in a very violent way. Like, like, I really hate this person. He thinks he's a big guru. The whole mood was of independence. There's no authority. That was the mood of the time. So Prabhupada was like an authority figure. He would sit on the high seat and speak, and the audience was in front of him. And this is what the hippies didn't like. So he came there and he sat next to Prabhupada and was in between his class, was scowling at Prabhupada. And Prabhupada kept speaking. This would happen from time to time. And Prabhupada would just have to keep speaking. There's no way to control these people. They're wild. Even the police could not. So he kept speaking. And this man would keep looking at Prabhupada. And at the end, Prabhupada peeled the apple that he would always do, and he would cut it and serve it out as prasad. This is Prabhupada. After every program, he would serve out just a small piece of apple to everyone. This was his blessing, his pure prasad that he was giving to everyone. So like every day, he took the apple, he took the knife, and he peeled it, and he cut it in many pieces. And then Satsuru Maharaj describes in that book, he places the apple, so he gives everyone a piece. Apple is finished. He takes the last piece and the knife that he used to cut the apple, and he reaches forward and he gives it to that. Reaches forward with his hand to that person and offers him the apple with the knife next to it. And Satsuru Maharaj writes that everyone, their breath stopped when they saw this. And Prabhupada offered this to this man because he could understand the psychology of this man. He could understand that this man wants to kill me. He's so against me. He's like, people cannot stand devotees when they're in that mode. And so he gave him the option. Here's the apple. Here's here's the knife. You can do whatever you like. I'm not afraid. Prabhupada, one time he said, one disciple asked him, what does it mean to be a pure devotee? And Prabhupada said that you have no fear. He said, I have no fear. So he gives him the knife and the apple, and the man looks at it. He's shocked. And he takes the apple and he leaves the knife. And everyone's breath, goes down. So who can act like this? No one can act like this. They were only acting like this. Prabhupada was acting like this because of his pure love for Krishna, because he was living in his spiritual body. He had realized his spiritual form. He was on this fifth stage. So I'm done here. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. So we can have just 15 minutes of questions, comments. And I'll start with people who didn't get time last time. So Madhuri Mataji and Ambika Mataji, you can go first, and then we can take other questions. So
Hare Krishna.
yes, Hare.
Yeah, so I think I messaged you my question last time.
Yes. You
So
can repeat here so everyone knows your question.
oh, okay. So my question was, you were talking about how about the Harinam initiation and the second initiation, and how after the second initiation one can rise higher and maybe reach the Madhyama platform. And I was a little concerned because here in India, I'm His Holiness Radhanath Swami Maharaj's disciple. So here we have a long waiting time. And in my case, I almost waited 15 plus years. So I was just thinking, okay, so is there any chance in this lifetime at all, to because second initiation is somewhat very difficult. It's not a regular, especially in India. It has a different course, takes several years, and that too only on need basis. Every temple has a different rule, and there's a lot of things.
Yes. So that's a very nice question, because Rupa Goswami, he clearly says that when a devotee has taken Diksha, then we should offer him obeisances, because on that platform Diksha, that person becomes a Madhyamadikari. And by Diksha, as I mentioned, that refers to second initiation. Rupa Goswami was referring to second initiation when he says Diksha. So that is true. That's 100% true. We take Rupa Goswami's words on face value as it is. At the same time, Prabhupada explains in many different places that what does Diksha or initiation mean? When does it happen and what does it mean? Diksha and initiation is when the disciple accepts the spiritual master and the spiritual master accepts the disciple. That is the meaning of Diksha, when the connection in the heart takes place. That may happen at first initiation, that may happen at second initiation. So Rupa Goswami means second initiation because that's what it meant at that time. But what Diksha means is when that connection, complete surrender on the side of the disciple and the acceptance of that surrender on the side of the spiritual master takes place. That is when one is understood to be a Madhyamadikari. That's when one gets Diksha. The fire sacrifice itself, or the name giving itself, is a formality. It's not a meaningless formality, just like marriage is not a meaningless formality. But the essence of marriage is love. And two couples are married when they love each other. On the other hand, you may have Diksha, you may have second initiation, but you don't have Diksha. Because Prabhupada says, if you don't follow the rules and regulations given by the spiritual master, if you don't follow his instructions, you're not a disciple. He says that clearly, you're not a disciple. In one way you are, because the spiritual master will always worry about you. But disciple means discipline. Disciple means that the disciple is following. And if we don't follow, then the spiritual master is not obliged to take us back home, back to Godhead. If we do follow, then the spiritual master is obliged, and the spiritual master will come to take us back to God. But if we don't follow, we are not obliged. He is not obliged, the spiritual master. It's not that we do our sinful activities, whatever we want, and the spiritual master has to stay in this material world life after life to deliver us. The spiritual master will stay life after life to deliver us if we are following. So initiation is when that connection takes place. And so those devotees who have to wait 15 years or so, they're still just as fortunate. Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur had to wait so long to get initiation from Gaur Kishore Das Babaji Maharaj. You'd keep sending him away. But that doesn't mean that Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Maharaj was not an advanced devotee until he got his initiation. No, that was pastime. That was, the spiritual master's mood. And so some spiritual masters in our movement, they give, even 1 year is too long. They want to give right away. And other spiritual masters, they want to wait 10 years. And both spiritual masters are pure devotees. So it's just their mood. But the initiation takes place when that connection is made. And that is a connection of the heart.
Thank you, Prabhu. So we hear this a lot, even for first initiation, like, following the guru is more important, the connection is more important. So I think like even what you mentioned today in class about advancing and trying to follow that path. So I guess it automatically connects us to the guru as well. And yeah, nevertheless, we do keep hearing this conversation a lot about the second initiation and first initiation and the essence. But like you said, in essence, yes, you have to be a disciple, discipline, but understand or no, don't get insecure about the fact, about the rituals and the formalities so much so. Thank you, Prabhuji.
Thank you. No, thank you very much for this nice question, because it's actually an important practical question in relation to the verses that we talked about. And we should not think in our minds that this devotee does not have second initiation. I do, therefore I'm more advanced. Because we don't know, maybe that devotee has been waiting 15 years and it's more the formality that they're not able to get to, not the actual ceremony. Not the actual, the connection. So yeah, well, thank you. Ambika Mataji.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji, Dhanavad Pranam, Jai Srila Prabhupada.
Hare
Thank you for the wonderful class. I also messaged you my question, but it seems like you prepared, like you gave the whole class in response to my question, the second question.
Really?
It was on chanting. So I'm so grateful and thankful that, I got such a big explanation about chanting, because I'll start with that. It was more into relation to somebody like, neophyte devotee, in Bhakti Ruksha. And we were talking about chanting, and she's like, some days I'm like, she's very, very natural and honest person, and very interested in Krishna consciousness. So we were talking about it, and like, one time we were talking about, the realizations you get, reciprocations that you get from Krishna. So she's like, I'm getting some reciprocations from Krishna. And I was like, very nice. We were talking about all that. But, at the same time, I'm very honest. Sometimes I don't feel like chanting. Some days I chant so many rounds, and some days I like, I'm like a child. I'll go to Krishna and I say, I don't feel like chanting. So I was trying to emphasize and say, you should not do that. You should have a regulated practice. You should chant fixed number of rounds every day, things like. So I was focusing more on that. I said, this is very important, because we cannot, and I brought up a point about mind, mind being friend and enemy. So I was thinking at that point that, how should I convince her more about chanting, fixed number of rounds and things like that. So that was my question last week. And I think we talked about pretty much chanting pretty much the whole class. So thank you. I think I have so many points. I don't know what to talk to her, but I think next time when I see her, I think I'll definitely talk about the importance of regulated chanting. So thank you. And Prabhuji, the second part was just a clarification. So last time when we talked about different kind of devotees, Kanishta, Madhyama, and Uttama, based on our sadhana, faith, interaction with other devotees, I think depending on, some devotees are, or in my case, I'm probably, my faith is stronger, or maybe, less weaker than others. So sometimes, people sometimes they dwell between Kanistha and Madhyam level, depending on the different types. But once you reach on a Uttama level, I guess you don't dwell back into Madhyam or Kanistha. Is that true? Is that a true understanding?
Once you're Uttama, you don't come back to Madhyama or Kanishta. I think of it more in terms of, because that's what Prabhupada, I think, has mentioned, more in terms of bhava and prema, Shraddha, Sadhu, Sangha, Bhajan, Nishta, Ruchi. So Prabhupada says, as we read, that once we're on the stage of bhava, we don't fall into mature life again. But he doesn't exactly mention whether or not, if we're on the stage of Uttama, if we can fall back down to the stage of Madhyama or Kanishta. But I would assume that a Bhava Bhakta is an Uttama Adhikari, but I don't know if an Uttama Adhikari is necessarily a Bhava Bhakta. That is a good question. I don't know the answer to that. An Uttama Adhikari could maybe be also in the stage of Asakti or Ruchi, and therefore an Uttama Adhikari could still fall down. Or maybe there's different definitions in different places. So an Uttama Adhikari is only on the stage of Bhava. That could be a definition somewhere. So I don't know about Uttama Adhikari, but in terms of Bhava, once one reaches that stage, as we were reading today, they don't fall down again.
Yes.
Into mature life.
Yes, Prabhuji. Yes, thank you. And I think, it's more like most of the time when we are reading about the offenses and, the different type of divorce, we always try to categorize other. But, I think it's more for us, we should always try to categorize, it's for us, not for nobody else, this is just for us, I'm at the Kanistha level, nobody else.
Yes, Mataji, that's a really nice point. Yes.
Thank you, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna.
Thank you. Hare Krishna. Thank you. Any other questions?
Prabhu, is it okay if I ask 2 small questions?
Yes, I saw Gopal Govinda Prabhu's hand go up. Maybe did you have a question or no? Okay.
Hare Krishna Prabhu.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you so much.
Thank
I
you.
just wanted to convey that the beautiful classes, especially the the last verse you covered today, different stages with the wonderful examples, and may not be a question, maybe a request rather. These topics are a little bit more subtle and complex in really realizing the concept of that. And we do meet the devotees. Some devotees looks like supermost, like they look like on the topmost level, but then when you interact with them, do you realize they are like just another person. So so that's I know that's a misunderstanding on the person's part, how they understand it, but how do we get away from this kind of offensive mentality?
I guess maybe this doesn't answer your question, but my realization, very limited realization on this, is that we get this offensive mentalities, different offensive mentalities, when we have a big false ego, when we think much of ourselves, and this is when we start to meditate on the fact how I am so trash, like I'm just so insignificant, I'm so small, I'm nothing, I'm so fallen myself. Then whatever faults, problems there are with other devotees, we will still see them, we still need to discriminate, but they won't bother us so much, because we'll look back at ourselves and see, well, what am I? Right? What am I? So actually, like we were discussing, that actually solving other problems is more difficult, it takes more time than you could say just focusing in some ways on ourselves that we can change. And this statement that I'm saying, I think it does have Shastric evidence for it, because when we read the Chaitanya Charitamrita, we see how Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami, he says on many different places that I am like a worm in stool. He says, I'm lower than the worm in the stool. And very advanced devotees, they mentioned how this was not just his way of saying, these great devotees actually felt this way. They actually felt so fallen. They actually felt like, I'm a worm in a stool. I'm like, so even if someone says my name, Krishnadas Kaviraj Swami said, that person may not get liberation because just saying my name is so abominable. I'm such a fallen person. Um, and so we have to, what is stool? Stool is trash, right? We have to feel like I'm not anything in this world. I'm just really, really fallen. Of course, artificially, we can't do that. We can't have that mood artificially. So at least what we can do is we can think a little, we can think that I'm the most fallen devotee. At least we can think this way, that I'm the most fallen devotee. In this whole community that I'm living in, I am the most fallen. Where I start with that is my place where I start from. Now I can see around me which devotees are more advanced and which devotees are less advanced. But one thing is clear, that I'm the most fallen devotee here. And if I feel this way, then I can avoid that offensive mentality.
Thank you, Prabhu. Very perfect answer. And yeah, it definitely helps me understand this better. But then it raises a lot of questions. I'll let other devotees go ahead.
Yes, no, thank you for the nice question. I think I just gave a very kind of standard answer. There's also more details to it, like that's what Vaishnav etiquette is about, how to relate with different devotees. And that's what we're reading about Rupa Goswami, different levels of devotees. We relate with them in different ways. I'm just sharing what was kind of helpful for me, that even with our spiritual master, what happens is that sometimes we have disagreements. We disagree with our spiritual master. And my realization was because that happens generally because we have this big false ego. Like we think, no, I know better. And we might even know better, but we have a problem in surrendering. And this is why one very senior god brother of mine, who's now a sannyasi, he mentioned to me when I was struggling with this in my own spiritual life, he said that you have to understand that spiritual life is not about right or wrong. The issue here is not whether or not this is right or this is wrong. The issue here is that the spiritual master wants to see that how surrendered are you? It may be the wrong thing, it may be the right thing, but am I willing to follow the instruction of the spiritual master and submit myself, follow the instruction of the spiritual master, and have the and in this way follow the direction that's given, with the faith that it's okay, like going along with the desire of the spiritual master. Now, if the spiritual master is fallen, then we don't follow the spiritual master. But if the spiritual master is not fallen, if he's clearly not fallen, then the spiritual master is wanting us, they don't care so much if it's right or wrong. They want us to train us, to teach us to be submissive to their instructions. Because this is the path of spiritual life. This is the way they were also trained by their spiritual master. And like we were reading in that slide, that fifth stage is a stage of great submission. When God asked Abraham to sacrifice his first son, this is a very extreme example. We cannot imitate this, but we just try to get the message from it, that when he asked Abraham to sacrifice his first son, the issue for Abraham was not whether is this right or wrong. I mean, from a material estimation, it's obviously wrong. But the issue for Abraham was, can he submit to the instruction of God? The same thing is with us, that most of the time, the issue is not right or wrong. It's more about, do we have the strength to follow the instruction of the spiritual master? To have the faith that if I allow myself to not, if I allow to give up my false ego, I'll be still okay if I just follow that spiritual master's instructions. So we then when we're on that level, then we don't have any problems with devotees, because then we see, okay, I'm just a servant. So my so then we are more less our vision sort of changes, I think. Okay, thank you. Jamfakalata Mataji, your question, and then we'll end.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. Thank you so much for a very enlivening class. I just have two small questions, Prabhu. That when you talked about the offense, the to give some mundane interpretations on chanting of the holy name, Prabhu, when we go out to preach like book distribution and Harinam, we try to tell people that you chant and this is how, and now I'm little scared actually that I hope I'm not making any offense, that particular offense, at least when we are trying to convince others. So would you guide me a little bit at that part where?
Yes, like when we distribute books, we say, have you heard of these? Have you heard of these books? And they say, no. And they say, they help reduce stress. This is a very common line. It's an official line given by Vaisheshika Prabhu. We tell people chant because it reduces stress. Take this book, it reduces stress. So this is a different mood. This is just like when you have to get a child to take a medicine, you put it inside sugar. You put it inside a lollipop, and then the child takes the medicine. This is just to get them to get the book, but the book is doing the preaching. This, we're just giving them the book inside of a candy, just so they put the candy in their mouth. They start reading the book. So in that situation, we are not preaching. We're not explaining to them the philosophy, all these things. We're just trying to get them to get the book or to say the holy name. To get them to chant and all these things. But when we are giving a class, or if we're having an extensive discussion with someone, we should say that, no, this gives the love of God. So the devotee can use tricks to bring people to Krishna consciousness. That is bona fide. We can even dress up with long hair and wear pants and shirt, Prabhupada said, for preaching. We can have a wig. He said not have long hair, but we can get a wig. And devotees were doing this. But he never said that we should have long hair. We should be like materialist. In the same way, we can give people the toffee, but we should never actually believe it. We know that it gives love of God, and one of the side benefits is giving stress, is taking away stress.
But Prabhu, at the same time, like I remember when I was a lot of times convincing my own family in India, and I used to tell them, you all are disturbed so much. You all are not chanting. You all should take up to chanting. And sometime in order to convince them also, all your material problems will go away once you start chanting. Like how you were mentioning today, that we were reading in the purport that it cures even material diseases. Yes. But at the same time, when I'm hearing these classes, I'm like, am I doing right or wrong? I have no idea. All I know that Krishna's mercy, my family is now about to take initiation even from Radha Govind Maharaj.
Yes.
But at the same time, I'm little
yes.
trying to be careful.
Yes. So the offense is our motivation for chanting. So if we are chanting just to get cured from a disease, then our motivation is not pure. And if we say that this chanting cures you from disease, and that's what we believe the chanting does, then that is an offense against the holy name. But if a devotee is trying to serve the Lord, is trying to please the Lord, and the ultimate goal is to bring that person on that level of service to the Lord, but again, in the meantime, is using this as a tool to get a person to chant. Because see, chanting is always better than no chanting. Offensive chanting is better than no chanting. So even if you're doing it over an extended period of time, but you're trying to convince someone to chant because you convince them that it will cure their disease, then that is okay. Like Narad Muni did that. He said, you chant Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya and you'll get the kingdom. He told Dhruva Maharaj. But Narad Muni knew that by doing this, he will realize something much higher. So his motivation was to give him love of God. And therefore, he was not committing that offense. He was saying, you chant Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya and you'll get a kingdom greater than your father's, to get him to chant out of his mercy. But that was not his motivation. So the offense is in the motivation. And so if our motivation, ultimate end is that I want my parents to be healthy, and so that's why I want them to chant, and that's the only reason why you're doing it, and only reason why they're doing it, is an offense. But like you're saying, that wasn't your reason. That's why they're not now taking initiation. You were doing that to give them a push.
Okay, Prabhu. Thank you so much, Prabhu. I'm very, very grateful to you. I'll not ask second question, Prabhu, because I know you have to go. Maybe next time I'll ask again. Thank you so much, Prabhu.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you
Hare
very
Krishna,
much.
Prabhu. Thank you for your enlivening class and association.
Thank you. I hope it was okay. Thank you everyone for your very kind attention today. Srila Rupa Goswami ki jai.
Jai.
Deshamrita ki jai.
Thank you, Prabhu.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Prabhuji.
Prabhuji.
Hare
Hare
Krishna.
Krishna.
Prabhuji, Dandat Pranam.
Dandavat
Hare Krishna.
Pranam.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Prabhuji.
Prabhu.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. Dandavat pranam.
Hare Krishna.
Dhanavad pranam.